Coming up on episode 75 of the Behind the Back podcast, the Eagles have made the Super Bowl. We will talk about a little bit what we saw from the Commanders game as we look forward to 2 weeks from now. And then we pivot to the Niners, who we haven't talked about in a few weeks. They had some good news coming up, and Ben is really excited to talk about it. And then we have to pivot over to the Sacramento Kings and talk about a topic that we're really not that excited to talk about. Are the Kings going to trade De'Aaron Fox? That's been reported today, and we will definitely talk about that. So with that being said, let's get it. All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Marcos Conan Negrona. Beside me here, as always, is Ben, the Jet. Rhett, Ben, how you doing?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing good. My freaking team is in the Super Bowl, so I'm really excited to break that down a little bit. But at the same time, we're going to save a lot of the football stuff for next week. We're going to obviously touch up on some football. The Niners got some good news for you we're going to talk about. But the main story of tonight is going to be Sacramento, but we're going to say that for the second half of the show. So let's start with the Eagles advancing to the Super Bowl after decimating the Commanders 55-23. Dude, I want to ask you, did you think it was going to be that crazy?
No, neither one of us had the Eagles putting up 55 points. I mean, we can't act like we saw that coming. I don't think anybody in their right mind truly saw the Eagles putting up 55. You can call it a dominant win from the beginning, sure. But, dude, this was a statement win.
Yeah, I think it was funny. The second, and I brought this up on the post game pod. So for those who want to check that out, it's on our feed. I did mention, Ben and I were texting throughout the game, and I had mentioned like after the first Commanders drive, I was like, oh, Saquon is either the Eagles are going to drive or Saquon's going to hit on the first play, and then he hit on the first play, and I was like, oh my gosh, this game is looking really, really good. And from there, it just kind of didn't stop. So I was really happy with it.
Yeah, I think obviously we talked about kind of what we wanted to see from certain players, which we'll get into here in a sec. But we talked about that last week about what we wanted to see in this one, and the biggest emphasis was just the Eagles kind of sticking to their game plan and sticking to their strengths. And one of the strengths that they definitely stuck to was that damn defense. Like, it is incredible, man. It's not even close at this point. The Eagles are the best defensive team this year. To be able to do the things that they've done consistently at the level that they have all year, it's everything in the makings for a Super Bowl victory.
Yeah, the philosophy of this Eagles defense is bend, don't break, and make the other team beat you down the field. Because if you're forcing 13-play drives, 10-play drives, maybe you'll get tired as a defense, but they can force a mistake somewhere in those plays the more plays you're giving. So, this defense just executed, and they're forcing turnovers was unbelievable. Bond played an awesome game. The D-line was awesome. Everyone stepped up in this game, and I was really excited you could tell, out of all the games this year, especially in the past 6 weeks for Jaden Daniels, this looked like the game that he looked the most like a rookie, which was really interesting given the success he had against the Eagles just a few weeks ago. So, I'm happy that we were able to shut down Jaden and just play just complimentary football from top to bottom. When you have special teams forcing fumbles, that's just another good sign of things. So it was a great day. Literally, every narrative we could talk about was shattered by the Eagles. They're like, oh, we can't pass. All right, let's see this. Oh, Saquon's going to get stopped this week. Nah, it'll be fine. Oh, Jaden's going to light him up. Nah, it's okay. So just going into the Super Bowl, this was the momentum. This was the perfect statement. Hey, we are the best team in the NFC. So for the third consecutive year, second year on this pod, one of our teams will be representing the NFC against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I'm hyped. So I wanted to move on to just the Jalen Hurts of it all. Now that you saw our boy Jalen Hurts pop off and have an awesome game. Listen, one touchdown, but he had 4 total touchdowns. He threw for 245 yards. Listen, nothing to sneeze at, but he was also incredibly efficient. Another game of no turnovers. Do you think if Jalen plays anywhere like this, does that increase our chances in your belief in the Eagles for the Super Bowl?
Well, that's the money statement right there is if he plays an identical game to what he just played in the NFC Championship game, the Super Bowl is easily run through Philly. And that's the simplest factor there is to it. I mean, I don't see the Chiefs necessarily stopping Saquon, potentially slowing him down, sure, but that's about all you can hope to do. And the other thing you can hope to do is hope that Jalen makes mistakes. And the thing is, Jalen didn't make any mistakes in this last game. Like it was essentially a perfect game from him. And that was exactly what, I needed to see. And not that my opinion matters, but this is exactly what the NFL needed to see. And football fans needed to see was Jalen Hurts. How can you operate when you're asked to actually make a play? Because there were times in this game where he needed to go and make a certain play to keep a drive going, and he continued to do so. He was doing everything that was asked of him and more. And look, everybody wants Jalen to go for 350 for 3 touchdowns through the air. It's simply, and I'm trying to tell myself this now, I've come to this realization, it's simply not how this Eagles team is going to operate. This Eagles team is 100%, you nailed it earlier when you texted me, this is 100% a rugby-esque football team. They ground pound the hell out of you. They will run the ball down your throat. And then the second that you start to kind of slow it down, they're going to beat you through the air. And that's something that is just a recipe for success. And to see what we saw in this NFC Championship game at the levels that were played at every single position, expanding outside of Jalen Hurts, it was, yeah, man, this is a statement. It was really, really good to see.
Yeah, and a couple concerns. Our O-line has taken a hit. Cam Jurgens played when he came in midway through the game. He was still ailing with his back. He didn't start the game. Landon Dickerson started in his place, but he also got hurt and he's out. So those are going to be the two to monitor going into this additional bye week. But again, we're going to talk matchups. We're going to talk Eagles Chiefs all next week. Obviously, I'll be in Arizona, so it'll be a fun Arizona pod, and it'll be really fun visiting Mama Ruth. But what I'm really am excited for is like this again 2017 vibes for me in terms of this team is way better than the 2022 team. They're just more consistent. I think like I like the way that we can just complement from top to bottom all facets of the game. But there will be stuff that worries me. Obviously, if we get into a close game with KC, they have been dominant in those situations. If it comes down to a field goal from Jake Elliott from 50 plus, is that as secure as it used to be? Those are the kind of things we're going to have to pay attention to. And again, on the defensive side of the ball, everyone got out of there healthy, which is great. So we're going to have all of our defensive starters for the Super Bowl outside of Nakobe, who went out. But I feel really good about where this team's at, and guys are going to play really good, and we're primed and ready to avenge what we couldn't do the first time. And next week I'll go into like just kind of how I feel the similarities to 2017, why I'm confident in this team against the Chiefs. But the Chiefs matchup is going to be good. The Chiefs are they just played their best ball against Buffalo, and as questionable as the game could have been for Buffalo fans out there, KC ended up winning again, and that's just how they got there, and now they have a chance to make history. So it's going to be a battle. Saquon is going to make history most likely in the Super Bowl, breaking the all-time rushing yards record for postseason and regular season included. And the last person to do that was Terrell Davis, who it was also a Super Bowl winning season for him. So that'll be, maybe a little cool thing. So there's going to be a lot of fun storylines in this game. I know immediately people were like, man, it's Eagles Chiefs again. No one really wants to see this game, but let's be honest, everyone's going to tune in. It's going to be a fun game. I just wanted to take one last second to just, praise our coaching staff and our general manager, Howie. Since he won the Chip Kelly power struggle back in 2016, he's really just built this franchise to be so successful in the 7-year span, with like 3 Super Bowl appearances in the 7-year span, and potentially a chance to win 2. That's pretty huge. It's consistency that is just, it's hard to find. The Niners are, our teams are, I believe it's the past 7 or 8 years in the NFC, it's been represented by either the Niners, the Rams, and the Eagles in the NFC for the Super Bowl. So we've kind of dominated the NFC in this stretch, and that's just something you don't really see that consistently. So hopefully the Eagles can pair this run off with a Super Bowl. That would be such a legacy statement for a lot of these guys. But shout out to Howie, shout out to Sirianni for guiding this team throughout all the nonsense. He definitely deserves the respect. And, for the coordinators, Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore, I don't know where the hell that was. He was probably saving that all year because it looked awesome. So I was like, okay, you know what? If this is your coaching interview, all this stuff, let's go for it. I'm cool with it. But we're definitely going to talk Eagles next week. I just wanted to touch up on this one. This was an awesome win, a great feeling from start to finish. Yeah, I'm pumped and I'm hyped for the Super Bowl, dude.
It's going to be a good game.
Yeah. All right. So we will press on. We're gonna do a deep dive next week. I'm really excited for it. But we heard some good news on the San Francisco 49ers front. It's been a few weeks since we talked about them. You enjoy the time off, having taking a mental break from them?
It's been nice. I kind of talked to you about this off air a few weeks ago. It's nice to actually have an off season where, or rather a playoff where we're not actually participating in those playoffs and we can just kind of watch from the outside as a fan. And look, the playoffs haven't disappointed this year, but the off season for the 49ers did start early, and it started off with a bang. Marcos.
Let's go.
The Niners got Bobby Saleh back. I'm so happy. This was kind of a make or break situation for the Niners. They didn't interview many coaches for this position. They didn't have many plan Bs or Cs behind Robert Saleh, and it ended up working out. And it was kind of thanks to some poor decisions by other franchises. But look, this is how it works sometimes. And now we've got Robert Saleh back. On top of that, Saleh made a recommendation to the Niners front office and to Kyle Shanahan for the vacant special teams coordinator position. And that special teams coordinator was Brant Boyer, who was from the Jets, who also worked with Robert Saleh. So both of these guys come from the opposite coast over here to the Niners, and they both have a really successful background in defense and special teams. And it's lining up. So, those two moves, I'm excited about it. There's a lot to go. But what this does do is it gives me hope, because what we saw last year, Marcos, was a lot of hesitancy, right? We saw a lot of, lack of deals being made and lack of conversations being had. And you saw things dragging out into training camp. And it's been that way for a number of years, but you especially saw it last offseason. And remember, we talked about those vibes and how the vibes didn't feel so hot, and we were just digging for any good vibe going into week one. I feel like it's going to be different this year, just based on how quickly the Niners knocked off two of the most important things on the board going into this offseason. So really big moves, really excited to see what's next. And obviously, hopefully the next thing is getting Brock Purdy his contract, which you and I will be having some conversations on that in the weeks to come. But as for this week, just appreciation to the Niners and shout out to the Niners for making some really good decisions at coaching positions.
Yeah, and this is the tough part about it. Like, the Eagles and Niners did something very similar last year, especially on the defensive coordinator position. We hired a young upstart guy with no actual experience being the main guy, and it led to the defense being stale and guys not having answers. And now you get a guy who, in Robert Saleh, who you're familiar with, who has this whole defensive system, his familiarity with this team and Shanahan and everyone, like the vibes there are going to feel really good, especially for him, because the pressure is going to be off him to not be the head coach. That's Kyle's job. But Robert offers that experience alongside Kyle. So that's one of those things that now Robert's gained even more experience, comes back, and now the guys who had missed him before, they're like, oh, we know this dude. I'm sure Bosa and Warner are excited. Like, this is a great move. And I'm happy that it ended up working out. Like you said, a lot of things had to happen for it to happen, but this was good for the Niners overall. And I'm excited because now the Niners have their coaching staff set pretty much before the draft, which is huge. So now they can kind of pick their guys and go from there.
Yeah, and it is huge because one of the things that Shanahan's going to be allowing Robert Saleh to do is take complete and utter control over that defense. Shanahan's really not going to have a hand in it. He'll obviously probably make some recommendations. They'll have conversations about it, of course, right? But the power and the ultimate decisions are going to go to Robert Saleh, because he has proved to be that guy who has been able to make perfectly great decisions when it comes to time to do so. And one of those decisions is going to be with who we draft. We have a boatload of picks going into this draft, and a lot of them are going to be used on the defensive end of the football. And so, one of the things that they've got to kind of consider is where to take certain players during this draft. And one thing I want to point out is Tony Pauline reported on this earlier this week. He said, Niners coaches here at the Shrine Bowl practice have outlined what the plan is and hopes are for 2025. A major priority will be to increase team speed on defense, specifically in the secondary, via the draft and free agency. And this is exciting, obviously, because the draft is loaded this year in talent on that side of the football. But on top of that, there's also some good free agents out there. And Robert Saleh is the kind of coach that helps you recruit guys to a team. So it's really it's lining up to be a really good offseason if things go correctly. And the Niners, like we just talked about, have really positioned themselves well going into this offseason. So things are up right now. I'm excited.
Heck yeah, dude, that's good to hear. So, any other Niners news that's come out of that camp besides, these are good moves, and obviously a lot more is going to come, but anything else that's noteworthy so far?
Those are the big ones. The next questions are going to be who gets the first free agent, or rather, who gets the first re-ups on contracts,
Mm-hmm.
and the directions we go there. We have a lot of free agents going into this offseason, a lot to figure out. We're not going to be able to bring back everybody, simply put. But the biggest names are the ones that we got to keep an eye on. So you and I will have some conversations on those in the coming weeks here, because I don't obviously expect a deal to be made anytime soon necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
But those will be the things to keep an eye on next.
Heck yeah, that's awesome to hear. So, good news for the Niners. They got stuff building. So, we were going to pivot on now to our Sacramento Kings. Guys, we have De'Aaron Fox drama to talk about, and it's big and it's important. So, let's transition here. Give us just 1 second. All right, we are back to talk some Sacramento Kings, specifically our boy De'Aaron Fox, my dude. I got the jersey up there. You got the jersey on you now. There was news from Shams that came out today, reported that the Kings are open and listening to offers on our boy De'Aaron Fox, the franchise point guard, the guy who's been here for 8+ years now and has turned into a all-star player who's having an up and down season with injuries and everything like that. But you and I, over the past, month, 2 months or so, have talked about this possibility. But now we're here. So hearing the news that they're open and willing to take calls, the trade deadline is 10 days away. We don't want to assume anything happens yet, and you and I are going to talk about all these different things potentially going on behind the scenes. But what was your initial reaction to hearing this news?
It's deflating. When the Kings fired Mike Brown just 16 games ago, we kind of got the sense of the writing being written on the wall at that point, like, well, this is the first move of many to come. And then, in steps Doug Christie, interim head coach. Kings go on an 11-4 run after that to kind of, save the vibes of the season. But, at the very least, they put themselves in a position to make the playoffs. And so things felt like they were kind of back on track. And then, obviously the Shams report comes out, which I had kind of already heard some rumblings in the Sacramento community this morning around about 9 or 10 a.m. Some word of mouth was starting to go around here in Sac, and a lot of the big names for around the Sacramento Kings were starting to kind of converse about it. And then this all comes out. It's deflating. It's frustrating because De'Aaron Fox has been a major piece of the Sacramento Kings for so many years now, and he's been the focal point of our team for a majority of those years. And when you hit a point like this, it makes you kind of step back and think about, what will the team look like if you don't get the right return for a guy like De'Aaron Fox.
And I'm nervous to think, like, because there's a million possibilities now that it's out there, because number one, we could trade him, right? Like, this could actually happen and we can go through. But then another thing is, like, this is just gauging offers now, right? Like, okay, he's still under contract till next year. They don't have to really make a move right now. Let's see how much he's worth right now. And if someone throws us an offer we can't refuse, then maybe we do pull the trigger on it. But then again, so let's say it does happen. What does that tell us, about us as fans or an organization as the Kings? Like, listen, I understand that they've dealt away players who were fan favorites, the Tyrese Domas trade to think about, in a different regime when it was Vladi running things with the whole DeMarcus debacle where we, traded him away instead of signing him, even though we told him we were going to do that. But Fox and Boogie are kind of comparable in the level of talent that they are. Obviously, the teams are in much different spots, but I think this is kind of close in terms of the impact that Fox has. If we were to get rid of him, it would be the same. And to me, it's like getting rid of a player of Boogie's talent. Um, but the other discussions are, where is he going to go, and how much would the Kings be able to get for him? And then the question is, how much do they believe in this team? Because if you're having conversations about trading the person who's supposed to be your best player, do you feel confident about the other guys? Do you think that Fox is the guy who doesn't mesh well with any of these guys when people thought it'd be DeMar or something like that? There's a lot going on in my head, but I'm also, and I might be in the minority here, but I'm in this weird spot where I kind of want to see what would happen if we were to trade him. And I just think that, and listen, I'm one of the biggest Fox defenders. I love him. I praise the draft pick and everything. I've been on his side this whole time. But I also, when I watch other teams and I watch our team and we hit the playoffs in 22, and I wondered, oh, this team can get better. And then last year happened, and then the beginning of this year happened, and I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, there's clearly a ceiling on this team with De'Aaron Fox as our number one. But then we also have seen multiple moments, especially even after the Doug Christie of it all entering the fold, where this team plays, I feel like, smoother and more together when Fox isn't on the floor. The ball moves around faster. Maybe the defense takes like a touch of a dip on the perimeter, but that isn't even the case anymore with Keon, and Malik's giving a better defensive effort. Malik Monk is a point guard, just playing the two alongside Fox. Do you think, are you kind of thinking like, are you curious about life without Fox, or do you think that would be a bad move if the Kings ultimately traded him?
He has been a major part in what the Kings have been trying to do for, like I said, for a number of years, but especially in the past 4 years, when they really said 4 years ago, De'Aaron Fox, you are the face of our franchise. We're going to build this team around you. You are the guy. Well, now you're taking the guy that you've built this whole team around, not 100% built, of course, but you've built a lot of pieces around him. You put a lot of great guys around him, and now you're going to get rid of him. It makes me think, does it make sense at that point to just blow it up? Because how many more years can Sabonis continue putting up numbers like he is now? Is where I'm questioning that. And on top of that, the biggest thing is De'Aaron Fox was the reason that Domantas Sabonis signed his extension here, was why Malik Monk re-signed here for the contract that he did, was why DeMar DeRozan even signed here in the first place. Now you're taking this guy out of the equation. Is there a reason for these guys outside of the fan base to stay here? Because they haven't been winning. I mean, yeah, 11 and 4 in the last 15. Sure, that's great. It really is great. But ultimately, you haven't been winning. You're not in the place you want to be. It's, for me personally, if the return doesn't make sense, if you're not getting value back, serious value to build around, then at that point you need to blow it up. Because at that point you're really banking. So then you build around Domantas Sabonis, You build around Malik Monk, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but you're definitely not going to win a championship building around those, one of those guys. I think you got to build around somebody better. I've always felt like building around De'Aaron Fox is going to put you in contention. I don't know if you're a top contender, but you're contending one way or another. And at the very least, you're a playoff team. It's mind-boggling to me that this team will trade De'Aaron Fox before they even try to bring in a good wing player to put alongside of him. Like, they're more willing to trade De'Aaron Fox or test the market. I shouldn't say more willing to trade him because that's not even happened yet. But they're more willing to test the market with De'Aaron Fox than land him a comparable wing. That's kind of crazy. I'm kind of scratching my head about it, but I don't know. I start thinking about this rebuild at this point because it seems like with this core, you've smacked your head against the wall so many times and you're not breaking through it.
I guess, okay, so let's talk about some of the teams that have been involved. So there was reports that De'Aaron Fox does have a preferred destination, and that preferred destination was rumored to be San Antonio of the Spurs. And, ideally for the national media, that'd be great because you're pairing Wemby with an unstoppable point guard on the offense who can help take the load off of him and all that stuff. They'd be a great combination together. But so then if we investigate just the Spurs in general, then if you're making that kind of move for De'Aaron Fox, the only person on the Spurs who is at that level is Wemby. And then you look at the rest of the guys and you're like, on most teams, they are good bench players or rotational players, guys you can throw in there. So then the question would be, okay, if you trade Fox, how much are you getting back? What is considered an awesome return? The Spurs have a ton of picks, just like an insane amount of picks at their disposal to throw at us for the future. And it's not even just like, oh, now we have draft picks. Those draft picks, that capital also helps us potentially make more moves down the road if that's what we wanted to do instead of just sitting on the draft picks, right? But then what? Then you get a trio of, Keldon Johnson, Zach Collins, and Devin Vassell, and then like 2 first-round picks to match up financially, when the only other player that would make sense for like, oh, I want to build for my future would be their rookie Stephon Castle, but he's the 4th overall pick. That would be tough to get them to part with him because he would essentially be the 3rd of that piece to the San Antonio puzzle, I think. So, and then you explore other teams like the Magic, the Rockets. You got teams who are there, but then it's also like, do they want to disrupt what they got going on? The Rockets are number 2 in the West right now. They're cooking. They're doing their thing. Like, do they just disrupt that to throw in a player like Fox, who there's no telling whether he is a great fit for them or not? And then you talk about the Nets, right? People are like, oh, you go to Brooklyn, he has familiarity with Jordy, but Fox has also come out and said multiple times that he wants to win. So why would going to the worst franchise in the league be a spot that he'd be like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to go, like I'll be the number 1 guy on that team. No, he already lived 8 years of that. So it's like, there's going to be a little bit of push and pull. And I don't know how much leverage the Kings have now. But again, we're living in a world that if, let's say in the next 10 days, Fox plays unbelievable and he's back on track and things are awesome. Then he enters that potential, okay, let's see if he cooks the second half of the season. He's all NBA. Oh, great. He qualifies for a Supermax. Oh, great. That's $300 million. And then you're paying him $300 million, Domas $200 million. You're going to have to re-up Keegan for, it's going to be market value, so it's going to be 125 over. And then you have Malik for 80, DeMar for 70, and then you're going to have to make up the bench. The bench works right now. Technically, they could run back this entire crew and it would financially still work, but then you're dipping into the first apron, the second apron, where you as a franchise get penalized and the owners don't want to pay money. The only owners who ever do that are the ones who have a championship roster around them. So then the question is, if Foxy does qualify for that max, are you're just going to spend, you're going to marry Foxy and Domas for the next however long they are together and hope that they can potentially get over the hump and spend all that money with potentially nothing to show for it when you've kind of already seen your ceiling with those 2 guys as your 2 best players? That's the part that I get into the thinking of. It's more of like my 2K logic where I'm like, oh, I want to make a trade and see if I can get this dude in here, because like the whole adding the first and second apron thing that they did this past offseason complicates everything now. Teams aren't going to be able to keep their rosters anymore, and you're going to have to pay to win. So it really, I don't know if that's the world Vivek wants to live in, and I think he's afraid of that too.
All right, so let me ask you this. What is the right return for De'Aaron Fox? I'm not asking you like a specific player. I'm asking you what has more value to you personally. Is it getting draft compensation? Is it getting, draft picks, or is it getting star player or future star player to build around? Or is it a mix of both? Because a mix of both doesn't sound likely. I mean, the Kings they just tend to get the crap end of the stick more often than not. And especially when it comes to trading a star, you tend to not get the best of both worlds unless you're somebody insane who, can build a super team with picks, OKC. But I'm curious to see, what do you think is the right return in this situation? Is it that star player or is it draft picks?
So on a yearly basis, what's right, what's comparable always changes, right? Because you look at some teams who just sell out for everything, right? Like Rudy Gobert was traded for 4 first-round picks. Same with Mikal Bridges. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, yikes, dude. Like that's an insane amount of picks. How do these teams get away with getting all those picks? Because like you said, we never really luck out in that kind of situation. We'll get a good player, we'll make a decent trade and get a good piece, but then we won't get the draft capital. We won't get anything like that. And I think part of the whole trade dynamic is some teams take losses now in order to better position themselves for the future. And I don't even mean tanking. I mean, like, okay, you're going to offload this player, and yeah, you might suffer a little bit, but then down the road, you get this player that makes up for the loss that you suffered. It might just not be an immediate return. So for me, for Fox, I think the minimum would be a nice young player, and that has to be like at the absolute worst, they have to be a starter. They have to be able to come in and start right away and contribute. And then you get another role player who balances out the roster. So in that case, it would be like a backup big or a backup wing. And then at least two first round draft picks. I would, if I'm the Kings, I'm not listening to anything that says one pick. If it has to be 2 first rounders, but one of them at least unprotected, because the whole protections thing is an actual thing that matters. Because if the Kings want to pivot off that draft pick, and you also, for Fox, if you're going to trade him now or even next year, you're going to get a pick that's very close in the next year or two that carries more value too. So those are the kind of things you have to look out for in a trade. And when we play this game right now, I thought about it earlier. I was like, oh, the Kings could do it right now and get a good return. But that's not necessarily the case, because Foxy still kind of has the luxury of saying, the Kings, and they're working together now. Like, oh, hey, we got a deal that works at Miami, and this looks really good to you, and it looks really good to us. Will you okay it? And then they're going to go through that kind of stage, even in the offseason potentially. So, but then the Kings are going to be strapped if we're this time next year, Fox is still on the roster, and we're 10 days away from the trade deadline. Things are kind of not the things are exactly the same. We're a middle of the road team, 10th in the Western Conference, not really getting anywhere, and the roster's just not getting that much better. And now all of a sudden we're kind of in that position where we're going to lose Fox for nothing. We have to trade him for something now, and then we get less in return. So it's like maybe the offseason's going to be the best time, because maybe a team nails their draft pick and they're like, oh, we are a De'Aaron Fox away. Let's get this done. So that's kind of it's tough. What's going to be a good return? I agree. I don't think we're going to get the return that's worth it for Fox, especially like if we were to do it right now, unless a team has to blow us away in order for us to trade a player like Fox. And I think that's kind of the dance we're in right now. And I'm just afraid. I think people are going to be mad no matter what when we get rid of Fox. I think people are going to say, the other team got the better end of the deal. Foxy is the clear, more proven player who can impact that other team better right away than our team. But then I look at our team and I like our depth. I like our starting 5 without Foxy. We're starting Monk, Keon, DeMar, Keegan, and Domas. I don't think that's that much of a, we're not suffering that much. Malik Monk is averaging 25, 7 assists, and 4.5 boards while shooting 40% from 3 with Foxy not beside him, or with Foxy out a whole game. So I'm thinking the level of production you're getting in return, Monk has elevated himself to that kind of player. So I'm just like, maybe the loss of Fox, it sounds weird. Maybe the loss of Fox doesn't affect this team as much as we would think so, despite the idea that, you know, because he's a top 25 caliber player.
And see, that's kind of where I disagree, because De'Aaron Fox is the glue that holds his team together, not necessarily in the locker room, but out there on the court. I know he goes 0 for 11 from 3 often. He'll throw a bad shot after bad shot, but when this guy gets rolling, he absolutely carries his team, and he put up 109 points, or in 2 games in 2 nights. So, this is frustrating for me, because this is a colossal failure. To see De'Aaron Fox, when this happens, if he gets traded, when I see that tweet happen, it's going to be really frustrating, because De'Aaron Fox is the style of player that wins championships. I'm not saying De'Aaron Fox himself wins championships, but he is the style of player that wins championships. And the front office is the reason why De'Aaron Fox didn't get a chance at a deep playoff run here in Sacramento. Look at our freaking draft picks. Look at our draft picks for the past 4 years. Guard, Keegan, guard. Like, how would it feel if you were De'Aaron Fox? All right, I want you to picture yourself real quick. You're De'Aaron Fox. You've been in Sacramento a number of years, and it seems like every single year the same thing is said. Well, De'Aaron needs help in this position. He needs a small forward. He needs a wing. He needs a center. And then your team continues to draft a player that could potentially replace you because he's the same position as you. They're drafting guard after guard after guard. Wouldn't you get frustrated at that point? You'd feel like, they're not listening to me. And you've asked my opinion, and you've heard my opinion on Draymond's podcast that this is a roster issue. This is a roster issue. And you continue to pursue older, smaller guards in the draft every single year. The type that Monty is going after, I like the type. Do it once or twice and then freaking move on, man. Like, we're stuck in this cycle right now. And a lot of that is Wes Wilcox. If you look at Wes when he left the Atlanta Hawks, I don't know if people realize, but the state of that team, they had 9 guards, 1 wing, 1 playable wing, and a small center. Ugh, that sounds like the Sacramento Kings in a lot of ways. Like, I'm a little scared, dude. Like, it's going to be a failure to see De'Aaron Fox leave Sacramento, because you don't get an opportunity with a guard like this very often. And to know that a De'Aaron Fox style caliber player was in Sacramento for 8 years like this, and we couldn't put the right team around him at any point. Sure, you want to say that 2022, 2023 was the right point because we made the playoffs? Nah, at this point, that's looking like a fluke, because the rest of the West was very banged up at that point, and the Kings were hot. Look, took advantage of it. That's what you're supposed to do. Great. But you didn't make any moves that next offseason. Drafted another freaking guard. You didn't address any of the issues that you needed to. Like, this is the constant circle that we're stuck in as Kings fans. To see De'Aaron Fox go will be a colossal failure, and it'll be a calling for jobs if the Kings don't do this trade properly. Like, this De'Aaron Fox trade now, if this is the direction that the Kings need to pivot, if they are forced to trade because the deal is right or because De'Aaron Fox is forcing his way out, if this is the result, then you have to get the right return. You have to do this right, because if this is not done right, this team will continue to be mediocre for another half a decade, another decade, who knows? Knowing how long it takes for a small market team to build.
And I guess the other point I want to make too is this team obviously has shown, the Domas trade worked better than any trade we could have imagined at that time, right? And we thought it was going to be we had no idea what to expect given the trajectory Tyrese was on at the time and everything like that. And we're like, oh, Domas Sabonis, he's on this indie team. We know him. Is he that good? And he ends up being insanely good. It ends up working out for both teams. But that's kind of rare. That is, we've seen. We take the Knicks and the Timberwolves for example. That trade did not work. You know, the Knicks are doing okay, but I think a lot of fans would argue that they expected to be a lot better. And especially when you have Mikal Bridges, you didn't need to double dip and trade for Cat. And Cat has been a decent fit, but the Julius Randle fit in Minnesota is awkward and it doesn't work. And you see teams make these moves like that thinking that they're one piece away and it just doesn't work out. So I'm nervous to think like I believe that if we were to make a trade in the next 10 days, it would have to be one where the return would be like, okay, maybe the Kings lost by like yay much, but didn't get fleeced. You know, like it would have to be that kind of offer. But I'm also at that stage too where I love Fox. I will say this all the time. I love Fox, but I do not think that they can win a championship with him as your number one. Now, if he's your second or third best option, that's great. But the way they built this team was for him to be the number one option. And I think now, especially when you see someone like Monk creating when I watch Malik Monk run the offense, I'm just shocked at how fast the ball gets moving and everything like that, even when they run ISO plays. I just feel a different energy. And it could be the injury, it could be the hand stuff just getting in his way from letting him be as effective as he wants to be. He dropped 30 last night on Brooklyn. Like, that was good. He had a good game. But he has been horribly inconsistent. And, again, how much of that is under his control. And he's playing hurt because he has to. I think if the way I talked about this last year with the way the NBA rules are set up, the awards are set up now. They changed the rules to where players have to play at least 65 games minimum in order to be eligible for those awards. So you see guys playing through just slightly more, those little nicks and bruises that they can play through instead of sitting out a game because they don't want to risk, if they do actually get hurt, then, missing out on that money. And I do think that's affecting Fox a little bit because like his hands are busted up and he's not giving himself time to rest. He's not giving himself time to heal because he has the pressure of, this is my year to make my money and I don't have another choice. So it's that, and that's that tough balance. And I don't think he's intentionally, getting in the team's way to try to boost his own stats. I've never viewed Fox as that kind of player. And even now it doesn't seem that way. He seems happy with the team's success. Whenever they win, he's still a part of it. But there is a part of me that is more on the side of I'm okay with letting Fox go with a chance to see what happens. And I'm also just like, I want to see Fox be successful. I feel bad that the organization continues to put the fans and the players in this kind of weird freaking spot. They don't know what they want. They always think that they have this great genius idea in the background. Vivek thinks he's cooking in the kitchen, and it's bad. I think when we look at the end of the day, when we talk about this Fox trade, if it happens, because again, and Ben alluded to it too a little bit, he hasn't said, Fox has come out and he has not demanded a trade. His agents did not demand the trade. This was an all Sacramento Kings front office decision that they decided to make. So we're not blaming Fox. We're not saying Fox has this ego. None of that is being said. This is all Sacramento. So then if a trade does happen, especially this year, the conversation is going to be, what is this front office doing? Who's really in charge? What is the plan? And then it turns into, if it's a colossal failure, then it's like, look at what these idiots did when they got rid of Fox. And it's going to be, the Kings, the Kangs, the poverty franchise that keeps doing it to themselves again. We're going to run into that. We're going to run in that situation. It's inevitable regardless. And I think it sucks. It sucks to just hear like this is what we're talking about, especially when we're 11-4 in our most recent 15. We're making a play. We're trying to push for the playoffs. This is the last thing you need to hear. And it's only 10 days till the trade deadline, so it'll go by like that for a lot of these players. But a lot can happen in just a few hours, and we've seen that happen all the time. So the Kings fans are going to be on edge for the next week and a half, and I don't even think they're going to feel good after the trade deadline either. So I'm nervous, dude. Again, I'm different in the sense that I feel like I'm in the minority where I'm cool with whatever happens. I'm interested in whatever happens for the sake of the experiment of it all, because I'm curious. I've thought about it now, especially over the past half year or so, I'm like, this team looks kind of nice without our star, and I feel bad feeling that way. And I've always tried to not let myself think that way, but I'm kind of in that camp now where I'm a little bit okay with it. If it makes sense.
I get that. I'll kind of backtrack for a second because you said this is like all a Sacramento front office thing, this whole, opening up and listening to trade offers. It also has a lot of Clutch Sports written all over it. And this is 100% how these trades go down with Clutch clients is they have a destination in mind. They use that as leverage. Teams end up having to listen to that leverage. And ultimately, the deal never ends up being as good for the team. And this is the frustration that I have, and I shared with you before even the podcast started, of De'Aaron signing with Clutch Sports, because I had a feeling this would come to it. With Rich out there doing what he does best, he doesn't want De'Aaron Fox in Sacramento. Like, you just don't want big names in small cities. And so it felt inevitable that it would get to this point. So, the idea that it, is all the front office, totally understand. And I agree. They're opening up and they're listening. They're probably trying to test the market and see exactly what the market looks like for De'Aaron Fox right now, and then base that off of, what it could look like in the off season, and if there's going to be anything different there. But if you get a banging deal right now, it would be pretty hard to pass it up. So this is why you open it up and you listen to it. But there's one more thing I want to talk to you about before we wrap things up, and that is, you keep talking about Malik Monk a lot, and you're talking about what this team looks like without De'Aaron Fox in it, and how you like the looks of it. And look, I see all the same things you are. The ball does zip around. The team has more energy, it feels like, when De'Aaron's off the court for whatever reason. My question to you: do you think Malik Monk is a better point guard than De'Aaron Fox?
And I think this is up to interpretation of whatever. Let's pretend, for all you listeners out here doing the same thought exercise that Ben's asking me, what is your definition of a point guard, right? Are you more of a traditionalist, just a guy who can, just get assists, who's averaging, Trae Young, who's being the perennial point guard this year, 10 points, 15 assists a game, and he's consistently running your offense? Or do you need a Steph Curry, just a guy who's just going to hit every dagger shot, and he is the everyone revolves around him, like the world revolves around him when he's on the floor? And Fox has been just such a downhill, awesome, fast player. He's shown a great passing ability. I do think, in terms of natural feel and pace of the game, since Monk has come to Sacramento, there is it almost looks like he's playing 2K with the way he's handling the ball in traffic, in space, and is still able to get a dime off to Domas or get the pass off all the way into the corner. Like, he has A, B, and C option. His eyes, his vision has all just kind of come together. And I think, when I think about why, and to answer your question now, I do believe Monk is a better point guard. He's kind of taken the James Harden mold. He was a shooting guard at first, but has the ability to pass better than anyone else on the court. And I think the other players feel that. His teammates feel that. They're like, Malik has the ball in his hands, but if he's driving and I'm just standing here wide open, he's going to find me. And that'll be his first option. He's not afraid to get the ball out he's not afraid to make the right decision. And now, I'm not saying that De'Aaron Fox can't do those things. I just do think, stylistically, what Monk can do as a point guard with his distribution and pace, by getting everybody involved in the flow of the game versus needing the ball to be effective in ISO and win your one-on-one matchups and hit the tough middies, which Monk can also do. So I just think that there's starting to become a level of, like, a dynamic with Malik Monk and this team, where I do believe that Malik Monk is kind of that connection for the team. Now, he's vocal, he's intense, you can get behind him, and he does lead with passion. And I think, for a guy like Domas to not be the only one on the floor at any given time leading that way, I think is helpful. And again, Domas I'm watching times where I'm watching pick and roll with De'Aaron and Domas, and I know Domas is never going to get the ball. But with Malik, that option is 50-50 as can be, and that adds an element that gets in other teams' way, in my opinion. So I like the look of what I've been seeing recently, and it is a small sample size. Malik and Fox have been together for their tenure here, and none of the guys have really been out for that long. But 2022, we were not great without Fox. Like, Fox was the engine of the machine, and as these years have gone by and guys have gotten better, that hasn't really been the case. I think we've played better without Fox. So, like, listen, again, I'm all groovy if we keep him and nothing changes, but there is an element to me that I'm like, I like what I see without him. So that's just my stance on that.
And there's a part of me that agrees with you on that. It's a loaded question. Do you believe that Malik is a better point guard than De'Aaron Fox? There's so many different ways to approach that, because it depends on what you're looking for, right? And that's what you kind of talked about before you broke that down. But I think the better question, which you did answer ultimately, is, do you think that Malik Monk is a better point guard for the Sacramento Kings and this team than De'Aaron Fox? And I think the answer, based on what we've seen, I think the answer is yes. This team right now is riding off of energy, riding off of playing free. And for a guy like Malik Monk, playing free is everything. For example, look at D'Angelo Russell, who was trapped in LA for, the last 2 years. And then he gets traded to Brooklyn here recently. And he immediately starts talking about how much he missed and will never take for granted playing free basketball, because it's just so much, it just feels right. And since Doug took over this team, you've gotten that sense with this team that they are playing free basketball. So if free basketball is the direction of this team, which I do think you can have a successful basketball team running a free team around Domas, Malik Monk, Keegan, guys like that. If that is the direction that they want to go, that just heightens even more that you need to get the proper return for De'Aaron Fox. The safe route is clear. Getting a draft pick return, like a mass overload of draft picks and building for the future. That's the safe route. The risky route is getting the win now players. And I'm not talking about the guys who are right now in their prime necessarily. I'm talking about guys who are coming up on their prime, guys who are due for a good career if things continue the trajectory they're on. And that's something that we need to keep an eye on as this kind of shakes down. Personally, I don't think De'Aaron Fox is getting traded in a week. I don't. I think there would have to be an offer that is thrown at the Sacramento Kings that is just so mind-blowing that's like, we can't pass this up. And the only way that happens is if that team, whoever it is that offers that package, believes that, one, De'Aaron Fox is their guy, and two, that De'Aaron Fox won't be available when they need him in the offseason. So it's going to take a team essentially saying, no, I can't wait. We can't wait. This is it. This is the time to do it. And I don't see that happening. I anticipate it. If it's happening, it's going to happen this offseason. And personally, De'Aaron Fox is on contract through next year. If De'Aaron Fox is on the team to start next season, I don't actually think he's going to go anywhere. And call that what you want right now. But the way that everything has quickly shaken down with this whole situation and how touchy-feely it's been, it seems like the writing has, been on the wall, like I said, and like many media around Sacramento have said. It seems like it's inevitable that De'Aaron Fox is not on the Kings anymore. If that's the case, then why, starting 2025, 2026 NBA season, why would De'Aaron Fox still be here if the writing is still on the wall at that point? So that's something to keep an eye on. We'll see how this whole trade deadline shakes down, but man, it's gonna be a juicy week.
Yeah, it's gonna be intense. It's gonna be stressful. We're gonna have at least one or two more pods before anything even happens. Or at least we hope. Maybe, and I hope nothing happens at the end of the day. That this is a safe space for me to explore my curiosity of what life would be like if we just talked about it. But at the end of the day, losing a top 20 player makes your life a little bit more difficult. So it is It would be it's a difficult discussion, but we'll definitely see what happens to the Kings. But in the meantime, they got a tough road trip to finish out, and who knows, maybe winning fixes everything. So maybe they somehow, surprise the Thunder and, win against Minnesota and beat Philly, and come home off of a winning streak. Maybe things are calmer, and maybe people will be like, okay, we can maybe have these trade talks in the off season and, do that. But I think for now, this team is happy with where they're at and hoping for the best. We're, we're, we're still in it. I'm afraid that we're going to be a play-in team this year. I'm afraid that that's our destiny. But I mean, if we get seventh or eighth seed, I'm okay with that. I'll take our chances of having 2 games versus the potential of 1 like last year. So it is what it is, and we'll see what happens in these next few weeks.
I'll also take my chances at having a home court advantage even in a play-in game, because at this point this team has rallied really well under Doug, and there's a new energy around playing on your home court, and it's something that actually feels like a home court advantage for once. So if they can continue building on something like that to have a home court advantage for a game like that, I'd feel pretty confident going into.
Same. Yeah, no, that's a good perspective. So, were there any other topics you wanted to touch on before we head on out of here?
At the end of the day, as much as I hate this team with a burning passion, I love them so much. We went to Six Flags on Saturday, and we were out there in the Bay Area, and I was repping my Kings gear. I was repping my De'Aaron Fox jersey, and I was proud as hell doing it, even though this team was a 10th seed and has been, the epitome of just an incompetent franchise for a number of years. The thing with Sacramento, guys, is this is our team. Like, this team means everything to this city, and these fans will continue to back this team regardless of what happens. And one thing I know for sure is if De'Aaron Fox is traded, he will be welcomed back here with the warmest of welcomes. And that's something that I trust full on with this city. So no, let's go Kings, man.
Let's go Kings. I appreciate that. No, it's true. I agree with that completely. On the off note for your Six Flags, how many Eagles fans are down there, huh? Too many?
I actually have a funny story on that real quick. So this guy opens this door for me, and I'm wearing my Kings jersey. And he's like, hey, go Kings. And I'm like, yeah, go Kings. And then he sees my Niners lanyard and he goes, oh, go Eagles. And I'm like, nah.
Go Birds. Yeah.
It was nasty.
I love that, dude. That's lit. We got to have Philly fans out here. I knew it. So I'm happy.
It's crazy.
Happy you had a good time, though. Were all the rides available to you? I'm assuming not.
No, I'm actually really salty about it. My favorite ride, Medusa, was not up and running. And I was pretty frustrated about that. But I did go on Superman for the first time. I went on Kong, went on the Boomerang, all the good rides, man. And nice. It was a good time. It was cold, but it was good.
Love that. All right. So I think we will cap that off here. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. Next week is going to be a Super Bowl preview. I'm really excited. So got a lot of juicy stuff coming. Hopefully Fox stays on this team so we don't have to talk about that in the meantime, so we can just focus on football. It'll be very nice. But with that being said, this was episode 75 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social medias that are located up above for all you audio listeners out there. Links to the descriptions are down below. Please give us a like, subscribe, rate, review, follow, comment. We appreciate all the love and support that we have received as we continue to grow with you each and every single week. We appreciate you guys so much. I am Marcos Conan Negron. Beside me here, as always, is
Ben the Jet.
All right, guys. We love y'all. We will talk to you next week. Peace.
Peace.